right, here we go. Very excited for today's guest. He is the co-founder of the Blue Light Agency and the host of the Oversharing Podcast, Mikhail Alfon. What's going on, man?
What's up, bro? Thank you so much for having me on the podcast today. Um, Not much. It's been a long day, so I contemplated going home, taking a nap, and we are talking a little bit before we got on, and I was like, maybe I should do this just from my AirPods on my couch type of thing. I was like, no, we're gonna do this proper as I can be. I don't look quite as great as you do with all the lights and everything. It's pretty sweet over there. I'm jealous.
Oh, thank you. Well, I'm going to be very honest and transparent with you and our audience. Behind me, what you can't see is a bunch of stuff from our toddlers, toys, party favors, Easter stuff, baskets, candy. I have to, right before we record, I shove it all behind me and out of the way. So if you can only see what's below me, it's a very different story. So I got to use the lights to my advantage, man.
I love that. Similar here. We just moved into this office and I have a bunch of junk behind me too. So I get that.
Very nice. Well, I don't have an office. This is the home office. So you're a couple of steps ahead of me, man. But we're going to jump into all of that, everything that you do. But it's called Connectable, and the way we start the show is we like to let people know, especially with new guests, how we're connected to you. And it's kind of twofold. One, we're connected to you through social media. We started following you maybe a year and a half ago because on your podcast, you had one of our good friends, a very good friend of the show, Miss Lauren Johnson, on. And so we follow everything that Lauren does. And I think she shared one of your stories or your clip of the podcast that she did with you.
Yeah.
And so from then on, we started following you and just love the content that you put out. And I'm gonna be honest too, man. I'm a huge fan. I can't say huge enough. Huge fan of Erwin McManus and Mosaic
awesome
as well. I'm up in Sacramento, but I've been a huge fan of Erwin for a very long time. And so I was jealous, man. I saw him on your podcast. I'm like, oh, what's better than that? That's like a top 3-5 guest for me that I would love to have on someday. So that was cool, man.
Bro, I can't even tell you how much of a trip it was to get Erwin on it. Like, for whatever reason, one day he started following me on Instagram, and I think I was sharing a couple of his clips.
Yeah.
And he started following me. I low-key tripped out. I showed my wife Alexa, and she knew I was tripping out on the inside, and I just shot my shot. And he was really gracious and gave me an hour of his time. I will say that it was my least favorite interview ever, not because of him, but because of me. And even 200 plus episodes into it, he was the guy that I was finally kind of starstruck by, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And so I was kind of off my game, but he's also such a powerful communicator. It was hard to not let him take the lead.
Right.
And so that was kind of interesting. That was an interesting experience. I mean, I think it was still, everybody else says it's great. I'm sure you probably have the same thing where you're kind of judging how you did on a podcast type of thing, how your interview went. And
absolutely,
that one for me is my least favorite one for sure.
Oh yeah. And I would be the same way, man. I understand that for sure. And it's tough sometimes to interview someone like that you have so much respect for, because, and I don't know if this happened to you, because it was a little while ago when I listened to the episode, but I'll say this, man, from my perspective as a listener, you did a great job.
Thank you.
Like I said, I'd be in the same boat. Like, I can't believe this conversation is happening. But sometimes, and my co-host, who's obviously not here tonight, we've joked about that before. Sometimes you have such a engaging guest that you almost lose track of what your next question is going to be, because you're so wrapped up in what they're saying. It's like, oh man, I'm the host of this thing. I got to keep this thing going. But you're so, fascinated by what they're saying. And so I can't even imagine what that would have been like. But yeah, I mean, that was just so cool. And obviously I saw you had Joe Smith on recently as well.
Yeah.
Who my wife and I have listened on Sunday mornings plenty of times to both of those guys. And so that was really cool. So anyways, those are some of the common connections, but the main common connection was Lauren Johnson, who's a good friend of the show. Yeah. And so after, like I said, we followed you for a while. I was like, man, we have to get this guy on the show, because I really appreciate all the creative things that you're doing. So anyways, that's how we're connected. But now that's enough of me talking. Tell me a little bit. Who is Mikhail Alfon?
Man, Mikhail Alfon is he's God-fearing, and he is a very proud husband and soon to be father. So I'll be joining the toddler mess soon. My son's due in June. Thank you so much.
Oh dang, June. That's coming up quick.
Yeah, it's coming up a lot faster than I thought.
I bet.
I think mentally and emotionally, I am so ready for this, but like logistically, so far from it. Um,
Oh man.
but yeah, so I guess those are really the two most important things for me. And outside of that, it's kind of weird to say what I am and who I think I am, but I think at the end of the day, just a creator. I love creating things. And sometimes that manifests in this agency, Blue Light Media, that I've been running for the last 9 years with my co-founder Nelson and Sarah. We have a great team of 10 people now. And so it could be creating a business, it could be creating a podcast, or just some sort of connection or something like that. um I think my wife might contest this because I have moments of being somewhat impatient, but I genuinely love connecting with people, and that's why I host my podcast, right? And it sounds like that's why you host yours, so I think that
Yeah.
might be our connection as well.
Right.
And yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot of things. I want to be professional boxer, but not professional. But I love boxing. I love, Family Guy and Star Wars and all those things. But again, at the end of the day, God-fearing, proud husband, and a creator of things that I can create.
Man, I can tell you're a podcast host because there's so many different directions I can go with what you just said. I don't even know where to start. Let's start here. 100%. I agree with you as far as the connection piece of it. And one of the questions I had for you. So again, you do a lot of different things, and I'm gonna just name a couple. You obviously are great on social media. You do put a lot of good content out. You do your podcast. You are the co-founder of Blue Light Agency, which we'll talk more about. You do all these different things. So you're a boss. You have employees, all that stuff. For you, this might be a weird question, but how do you feel like you best connect with people? Like, do you feel like your best form of communication is the podcast? Do you feel like it's having one-on-one interaction? Do you feel like it's on social media? Like, if you had to say, okay, I'm probably the best at connecting with people, this is the area that I connect best.
I love this question, but definitely one-on-one, something like this.
Sure.
My favorite thing to do is to like get lunch or dinner with one or two people and just start talking, really.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be about anything in particular.
That's the best. I've always said, I don't know if you feel the same way, but I'm guessing you probably do. One of the best, I remember back in the day, I was mentoring some young guys, and my favorite time was when I had to drive them somewhere because they're stuck in the car with you. And so there's nowhere to go. You can only, you can be on your phone, but at the same time, like they're within earshot the entire time. So you can have some really great conversations because you're stuck in the car for, an hour or two. And some of the best conversations are in those types of spaces. So I'm 100% with you. Like some of the best conversations, and when you lose track of time, especially, that's the best. When there's no agenda, you're not sitting down for a specific reason. You're just having conversation. Then you look at the clock. It's like, man, it's like a Joe Rogan podcast. Like we've been here for like 4 hours. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's not often I do that anymore. I feel, I was thinking about it recently. And I think because of just the nature of my career, or at least the nature of my job today, it's like everything is like in 15-minute, 30-minute, and hour segments. So losing track of time isn't something that happens often with me anymore. I will say that one of my best friends, Kyle, he's the guy that I can definitely lose track of time with. We'll sit down and start talking, and before we know it, like 3.5 hours have gone by, and it's like we've talked about so many important things, but nothing that we can remember. And
Yeah.
it's like, and those are some of the most fun times for sure. But yeah, man, I don't know why I've been thinking about that a lot recently.
That's interesting. Well, do you ever worry, because like you said, you're a busy guy. Even you said you even thought about going home and taking a nap before this thing. So obviously, time is of the essence for you, and it's going to get busier with a little one on the way. Is there ever a fear, or maybe there was a point in your career where this did happen, where you started losing connections because the busyness increased, right? Like the scale tipped in the wrong. I mean, you can never really find the perfect balance, but sometimes we get so busy that we start neglecting connections. We don't connect as well with people. And in our mind, it's like it's for a really good cause because we're pursuing a passion that we're in love with. But at the same time, the scale can get kind of wacky.
Yeah.
Have you experienced that, or is that something you're fearful of as you
Uh,
pursue greatness, basically?
I don't fear it anymore. Do I? I don't know if I fear it anymore.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
I do know that it's happened before and I regret it.
Sure.
And it was definitely when I was starting my agency, and I think that it is important to, in the beginning, and completely necessary, to put your head down and work as hard as you possibly can if you truly want to create something meaningful,
Sure.
period. And it comes at a cost. There's no such thing as, in my opinion, of like this work-life balance that I think people want to believe there is, like a 50-50 type of thing. You're
Sure.
going to go through seasons where it's like 80-20 or 100 or whatever the case may be, right? So there was definitely a time where that happened, and I think I took for granted the grace that my friends gave me, a couple of my friends gave me, and didn't realize that maybe they needed time with me, where I thought like, hey, like, you know, you, you're supporting me by not asking that of me, but they still kind of wanted that maybe, and so I regret that, because there was definitely time lost there. I know I missed like the birth of one of their daughters, and maybe a first birthday somewhere there, and I think we've come past that. A couple years later, in one relationship in particular, a couple years later, I decided, you know that I need to apologize for that.
Hmm.
And yeah, and I told them exactly what I'm telling you, of that I think I just took for granted that time. It's not that I loved them any less, but I just had this goal, and that was the cost of that goal, I guess. Um, was it worth it? I don't really know. I don't Sometimes I don't really know, because it's hard, because so many great things came out of that time also. Like, I met my wife during that time. The company obviously grew. So those are some things that were a benefit as well, but yeah, it's unfortunate. I think it's inevitable though.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I was actually a couple years ago. I was having a conversation with my friend Kevin Bracey, who's a motivational speaker. He's been doing it for a long time. He's a friend of this show, and one of the things he had mentioned, because I was asking him, because his message revolves around greatness and pursuing greatness, and I said, how do you figure out how to run after your greatness, the thing you're passionate about, but not just abandon everybody. And he said
Mm,
something that was really interesting. He said, really, when it comes down to it, you're going to find people that can breathe. Like, you're trying to achieve a certain altitude. He said,
mm,
not everybody's going to be able to breathe at that same altitude
mm,
as you're climbing higher and higher and higher. He's like, that doesn't mean you love them any less, but it may just be that they're not meant to go on that part of the journey with you,
yeah,
because they may not understand. It may hurt them too much. He said, and that's okay. They don't have to. But he's like, pretty soon you'll start learning, okay, who's on this ride with you and who's on this journey with you. And even when you hit those points where life's more stressful, you're less visible to your friends, like, they will understand. So, but again, it doesn't make it any easier. It's just
yeah,
kind of one of the challenges. And I like what you said too. There is no, this idea of a 50-50 balance is a nice fairy tale, but
mm,
the reality of it is it's just not going to work. I mean, you'll
yeah,
pretty much go nowhere, right? If you try to
right,
maintain that 50-50.
100%. And it's just like, most people are trying to balance more than two things anyway, and
Sure.
something's got to give, right? So life is consistent of so many things, whether it be your friendship and your family, your friendships in your family, or whatever else, or your hobbies. Like, something's got to give eventually,
Sure.
and hopefully, over time we find a way to integrate all of those things together. But I'm personally still on that path to try and figure that out.
Man, I think most of us are. Well, and it's interesting when you start having kids, right? Like, you're about to right now, because then it's like they see everything that you're doing. So you want to be the example of that work ethic. You want to be that example of someone who's going, head on for their
Mhm.
passion. But then at the same time, you want to be present when you're with them as well. And so it's just a constant, it's a constant juggling. It's not even balancing, right? You're just juggling things all the time and trying to make it work. So it is interesting. So you're much more busy than I am. So I don't envy your schedule, man. But you've obviously, like you said, you've achieved some great things. So um, you know, like you said, I think, like I said, everybody's on that same journey trying to figure it out. So again, it's awesome. So, and the plan is to keep everything going once you have the baby, right? So, like,
Yeah,
podcast still going, all that stuff. Yeah, that's gonna be fun.
I'm not I don't, I hope this doesn't come off disrespectful to anybody, but I think then my next thing that I want to do, because I'm oddly competitive, is I want to prove this whole idea wrong that like once you have kids your whole thing gets messed up.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the one thing where I don't think that that has to happen for me personally. I'm insanely blessed that I was able to start a company that it, that it runs and whatever. I work in it still, right? But
Yeah.
I'm insanely blessed for that opportunity. And because of that, I think I can integrate, you know, being a parent within it as well. Of course, that's gonna take some finessing, I'm sure, but I want to prove that wrong. But yes, everything I still plan on not just everything running, but everything growing as well.
Man, it is that competitiveness in you, because I have something similar. You can ask my wife, because a lot of people, said certain things like, well, you're not gonna be able to do this or that. It's like, well, we'll find out. And I think a
We'll
lot of it
see.
comes down to, what I'm saying? Like a lot of it comes down to, and this as a boxer, like, you have to really dig deep, and it's not just like, I'm really tired. Well, you're tired, but you kind of got to keep going. Like, some people may not agree with that, but I think, as long as you can keep it going, if you
Mhm.
find the thing that you're passionate about, you find a way to make it work,
Yeah,
even as challenging as it may be, and as, tight as your time windows start getting, like, you'll figure out a way, you know what I mean? And then
100%.
the things that you don't care as much about, you'll know too. It's like, well, I kind of push that off to the side pretty easily. That must not be a priority for me. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? So
Yep, that's exactly right.
100%. No, let's talk about the boxing thing real quick, because you kind of brushed past that. You kind of just very quickly said, like, I kind of want to be a professional boxer. Maybe not. I don't know. So okay, so explain a little bit to me, like how long have you been boxing? And is the professional thing is a serious thing? Like, have you taken any
Mm,
fights yet?
no.
Okay.
So the professional thing is not a serious thing for sure.
Ah, okay.
But I think I want to take an amateur fight.
Nice.
Um, there's a lot of training involved with it. I've been boxing for 5 years to answer your question. I've loved the sport for how old am I? 16 years. And finally started, training about 5 years ago. And it's been amazing ever since, completely obsessed. The sport itself has changed how I like a lot of things about my life in a good way. It's gotten me mentally through some really tough times. And, you know, it's just impacted so much, like not just like how I carry myself. And it's funny, I don't carry myself with more bravado. I carry myself with more humility, because I know the guy that weighs 30 pounds less than me can hit a lot harder than me if he
Yeah.
wanted to. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
um, so there's a lot more humility there, and really just from like a general like how I live my life is a little bit different, not crazy, like I'm not as as disciplined as a lot of these amateurs and pros and things like that, but like I go to sleep early because I want to wake up early and train. I run because I want to box better. I eat a little better because I don't want to get too overweight to spar or whatever the case may be, right? So all of those things kind of feed into that. um do I want to take an amateur fight? Yes, kind of. I think it's like that marathon for a lot of people. But the one thing that would be challenging with that is that, my wife is very supportive in a lot of things. This might be the one thing where she's like, I don't know, because she
Yeah.
doesn't want me hurting myself. It's coming from a place of love.
Sure.
And yeah, and so I don't think I would be able to do it without her by my side and being
Yeah.
ringside. And if she's not going to be there for that, then I don't want to do it that bad.
Yeah, that makes sense. I like that though. It's like she would support anything. This might be the one
I
that
can't
pushes
blame
that.
her.
Oh, sure.
Honestly, sometimes I'm like thinking to myself, it's like I really couldn't have picked up like any other hobby that didn't include like getting hit in the head repeatedly, like anything else. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? But
Yeah.
it just it's so challenging. It's so rhythmic. It's so, and like you said earlier, it forces me to dig out like things that I didn't know were possible, just from a straight physicality standpoint, and like, oh, can I take one more round? And,
Yeah.
or getting hit hard enough, and just the fact that I didn't take a knee or something like that, all of those things kind of make me feel like when you do that before 7 o'clock in the morning, like an email is really not going to piss you off. You know
Right.
what I mean? So
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Someone was coming at you. It's like, yeah, a nasty email. It's not that big of a deal. At least they're not
yeah,
punching me in the face. That makes
yeah.
sense. Um, so another question, I wonder if this kind of ties into what you just said and how you feel about boxing and the way it makes you feel. But obviously, a lot of the things that you do, and you mentioned like you like creating. You like
Mhm.
doing creative things. And like I said before, I'm going to mention it again. You post a lot of great things on social media, and there's a lot of creativity involved in that, and the podcasting and what you do with Blue Light. So, what do you, so kind of a two-part question. What do you do to maintain the creativity and to keep your mind fresh and to make sure it's always creative? But on the flip side of that, when you do run into a rut, a creative rut, like how do you get out of that? Like I
Mm,
imagine boxing is part of that for me. I've always said, I'll go run. And sometimes like
mm,
when I run, like each mile is like just another knot untangling in my head. And then by the end of it, it's like, I have all these ideas. People have different things, right? So, like I said, two-part question. How do you stay fresh with the creativity? And then if you do find yourself in a bind, how do you get out of it?
mm. Well, as far as the staying fresh with creativity is concerned, my wife and I are really good about traveling. And that's really where I find the most creativity or most inspiration because we're experiencing different cultures. Time feels a little bit different because we're no longer on that schedule. Like Monday through Saturday, almost every day, to be honest, but definitely Monday through Saturday are like they're locked in
Yeah,
as far as what we're doing. And my routine is very consistent and things like that. So traveling, seeing different types of architecture, experiencing different cultures, seeing how food is presented, those sorts of things are all things that really help keep me maybe inspired or creative. If I'm in a rut, it's that, to be honest, and it doesn't have to be something big. Running, unfortunately, like running and boxing don't really do that for me. That's more meditative in that.
sure.
Um, I'm not really thinking of anything else in that. But if I get caught in a rut, it's that. And sometimes if I get caught in a rut, I just kind of start. I force myself to start writing words, and sometimes it takes because I would say that my true medium is writing. I love writing, and so I just start writing things, and sometimes it turns into something, sometimes it doesn't turn into something, but you can't. And sometimes to get into flow it takes a really long time, but you kind of, for me personally, when it comes to my medium, I just have to like start writing, sometimes gibberish even.
Interesting. And that's always interesting when people do that because they kind of put it aside. They're like,
Mhm.
yeah, just got that out. And then later you hear these stories of like, hey, that was actually a really good idea. And then it turns into something, even bigger.
Yeah.
But I don't know if I can say this or ask this. Is a book on the horizon? Is that a goal of yours someday?
You know what? Yes, yes, a book will be done. I actually ended up writing a book.
Oh,
I have like the manuscript done, but not to get hyper spiritual, but I in no way, shape, or form was it glorifying God. And I think that it was stopped on a lot of different levels because of that.
interesting.
And I finished it in 2021. It's 2023 now, right? Yeah, I finished it in 2021. The last 2 years, I've been going through a lot of different things that have forced me to like kind of look at how am I approaching life in general. And that was one of the things that I know that I needed to change was who was I glorifying? Was I glorifying the creator or was I glorifying myself? And I was for sure glorifying myself. And that's not the case anymore.
Interesting. Well, that's awesome that you recognize that because I'm sure some people would just be like, I'm sure I'm just in my head. I'm sure it's imposter syndrome, whatever it may be. I'm like, I'm just gonna keep pushing forward with it because it's probably just me. But the fact that you recognize that and you felt that, I think is pretty cool. Because like I said, I mean, you could have pushed forward with it, right? And then but it wouldn't have been something that you would have been proud of at the end of the day, and it wouldn't have been.
Yeah.
Like let's just say it, it may not have been as impactful as it was supposed to be if
Yep.
you had listened to that. So I think that's awesome, man.
Yeah. 100%. Thank you.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about Blue Light Agency. Can you explain that a little bit more? How it started? I know you said you co-founded it with a friend of yours. Just tell me a little bit more about that and what you guys do.
Sure. So when Blue Light Media, we are a creative marketing agency that also helps with direct to consumer sales for consumer packaged goods. I don't know if that was a great elevator pitch because in my head it's always 1,000 different things. But in
Sounded cool to
essence, what we
me.
do is Thank you. I appreciate it. In my head, I mean, what we do in a nutshell is we help direct to consumer brands create content and then put that content all over the internet to help drive sales. And we do that by way of video production, product photography, paid social media management, influencer marketing, all of the things, right? So yeah, that's basically what we do.
Awesome. Which is cool because all of those things, again, going back to our name, Connectable, all of those things you're trying to help, businesses, you're trying to help organizations connect with their audience, right? You're trying to help them connect through different mediums. And obviously I don't know how many employees you have and all of that, but you have to also connect with people on that front too, because the
Yeah.
people that are working for you, I mean, it's like with any other job. If you can't connect with your boss at a certain level, it's going to probably create it's not going to be the greatest culture at the
Yeah.
workplace. So how are you, like, what do you do as far as, employee to boss connection? How do you, keep everybody on the same page and driven towards, helping, other people connect through what you guys do?
100%. I think the biggest thing is that I say 100% a lot, and the biggest thing quite a lot. It's funny
I say
finally
100%
hearing
a lot too.
myself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I say absolutely a lot. I'm with you. I don't say the biggest thing, but I do say the other one.
Yeah. And is it really the biggest thing if everything else is the biggest thing? No. But
I'm getting philosophical. Yeah.
right.
I like it.
To answer your question, for one, I don't allow my team to call me boss. I think that's the one boss move that I do where I
Nice.
actually pull the card is like, don't call me that. We work somewhat horizontally as well. And what I mean by that is although there's, a clear leader, in leadership, I'm in my office right now, but I work 80% of my day like on the floor with them.
Sure.
We're working on projects together, those sorts of things, and I'm never saying no, and I'm never unavailable to help them out with a project or help them out with something, whether it be reviewing an email that they're sending to a client or I don't know, whatever else, strategy development, anything like
Sure.
that, right? I want to be in there with them. So I think that when it comes to connecting with my team, that's really the fundamental aspect of it is I'm just not afraid to get my hands dirty with them. And I think that they respect that. I
Yeah.
hope they do. And keeping them motivated to do that for other partners, it comes down to me. If I'm not motivated, if I'm not bringing down, or if I'm not coming through with like a good attitude and being enthusiastic about it, they're not going to be either. So
Right.
even when it does like suck a little bit, like I try to bite my tongue a little bit and like do everything with a smile and an exclamation point. Um, and that's not always the case, and I'm also human with them, and sometimes it does just kind of suck. Like client services is not easy, and so I'll partake in a little bit of banter here and there, and just letting them know like, hey, look, like I get it. I get it because I'm doing it. I'm not getting it because I say I get it. I get it because I'm doing it with you. So yeah, I think that's fostered a great culture. I mean, I know it has because recently we had an employee, graduate from Blue Light, and we were throwing her like we always throw like a lunch with whatever restaurant or them if they decide that they want to move on. We'll throw a lunch with their favorite restaurant or whatever it is. And so we're throwing that lunch, and then another gal who had graduated, a couple months prior to that came down to celebrate that with us. And so that was a great moment for me because I realized that, it's not about how many people you can impact. At one point I wanted to build the 100-person VaynerMedia Gary V thing. And
Sure.
then I realized that for for one, it's a pain, but for two, I don't think that's what I want. And I realized that if I can make an impact as deep as that one, then I'm doing my job. I can hang my hat on that and I'm happy. I'm happy with that, And so, from that perspective, I think I did all the things that I wanted to do with Blue Light Media, and I'm excited to see where it goes now with a fresh set of eyes on it.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I love, the idea of, being in the work with your team. Because I know that, I mean, there's that quote, right? You got to be close enough to relate, far enough ahead to lead.
Mhm.
And you know, it seems like that's what you're doing, right? Because like in the vision that you're kind of casting for the entire organization and where you guys are headed, that's like you're ahead of everybody trying to think ahead of where you guys want to go, right? But then when it comes to the actual work, like you said, you're still getting your hands dirty. So no one can look at you and say, well, you don't understand. Like, no, I'm shoulder to shoulder with you. I 100% understand. I've been there. I'm there currently. And so I think that's I think it's just a great mindset when it comes to leadership. And I love the fact that, like you said, that you told the story of the woman who came back to celebrate, because I guess that's interesting. So, some people want to kind of hoard all the talent to themselves, right? It's like,
Mhm.
and they're probably offended when someone leaves their organization or their group, because it's like, well, I kind of fostered this talent in you. I built you up and now you're just taking off. But I'm getting the sense from what you're saying and kind of the heart behind your leadership is that it sounds like you celebrate it when you help someone build up a platform so they can see something that maybe they never saw in themselves before. And then now they get to go on and do something else that they're passionate about. Is that fair to say? Do you feel like that's accurate about how you lead?
Yeah, my mission is to create an environment where people can become the best versions of themselves professionally and personally. And I would be lying if I said it didn't suck when they left, because they end up becoming close friends. And of course, and it's, the logistics of like onboarding new people, so on and so forth. But, you know, I also understand that like it's a marketing agency, and I'm very proud of who we are, what we built. But for a lot of people, agencies can be especially of our size, can be a stepping stone for where they go next. And I hope that they get to learn things like how to collaborate with people, how to present to a client, and then because we're pretty small, like it's only 10 of us, right? They get to hear conversations that they might not hear, so that now they have better like business insight that they might not have the opportunity to do at huge organizations. So if I'm truly on a mission to create an environment where people can become the best versions of themselves, I also have to accept that the best version of themselves might not be within the walls of here. And I'm just preparing them for that. Right. So yeah, man, like I definitely celebrate it. They're not always easy. Um, and honestly, if I'm being honest, they're not always pretty either, but majority of them are, so I'm really grateful for the fact that, you know, my team feels comfortable enough to where they don't feel so like I owe Mick to stay or whatever it is. And I feel grateful for the fact that like, that they built these friendships and skill sets and and that I like to say me, but they really did it. Like at least we, provided a space for them to figure out what they're passionate about, figure out what they're good at.
Right. Right. Yeah, we could talk about that for the rest of the episode, but I'm not going to do that because I want to get to the podcast as well. But before we actually talk about your podcast, let me ask you this: do you have a dream guest that's out there? I mean, you got Erwin,
I
but
know.
besides Erwin, do you have another guest that you're like, man, that's like the great white? If I can get you know that person on my podcast and have a
Mm.
conversation, like that would be the dream guest.
Can I give you two?
Please, you can give me three if you want.
Oh, wow. Dang.
Yeah.
That's so generous of you.
Well, I know, we try our
The,
best here.
well, the first one for sure is I would actually like to have Erwin McManus back on his terms. And
Oh,
what I mean by that is like I want to be able to build it, so like build it and because he's still, it's so weird to say it's like this because he's just a human being. He still follows me on Instagram, and Joe Smith follows me too. So eventually they're going to see it. I'm going to run into him or whatever. But I want
yeah,
to build it to the point where now he wants to be on it. So
yeah.
for me being the competitive person I am, and me knowing that I can interview him better than I did, I want him to come back. So that's number one. Number two, I'd love to interview my son in 20 years and ask him how I did.
Ooh, that's good.
Yeah, but I don't have anybody else outside of that. I don't think so anyways. I can't think of any off the top of my head that I would really want. I don't really idolize a lot of people anymore.
Yeah,
And I
it's
and
probably
I
a good
think
thing.
yeah, yeah. And the thing is with Erwin, and you probably have the same sentiment. It's like there's very few people who bridge the gap between creativity, entrepreneurship, and faith, and
Right.
have faith really be the center of it. So So that's an example. He's actually on my vision board, and not because it's him, but because of what he kind of represents.
Right. That, man, that could be a whole podcast, in and of itself, the way he operates and the way he does things and the way his mind works. Like I said, you can't see it by my shelf. There's just all of his books, you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
that's
And
awesome. I love that there's this connection, because I've read at least five, or listened. I don't read them. I've listened to at least five of his books. So that's cool. I like this.
yeah, no, 100%, man. Again, that was kind of like the one. I wasn't joking earlier. Obviously, we have a ton of respect for Lauren. She's one of our favorite guests, and I have no problem saying that. Everybody, no offense to any other guest, but she's one of our favorites.
Yeah.
And then, I'm like, that's cool. He's connected with her. And then when I saw you had Erwin, it's like that was kind of like the final. Like, okay, I like what this dude's about, and I don't even know him yet, but I'm cool with it, because we seem to have these common connections of people that I really respect. But yeah, I mean. Yeah, like I said, Barbarian Way is one of my favorite books of all time.
Did I read that one? I think I
That's
did.
that's one of the it's a really small book, but yeah, just everything in that book just resonates. Soul Cravings too, one of my favorites. It's one of my wife's favorites as well.
Those might be the two that I didn't read.
Oh man, you gotta get to
be
those
honest
for sure.
with you, 'cause I know that I the Way of the Warrior is one.
Yeah.
Way of the Warrior is one that I read, which is similar to Barbarian's Way. Then I read The Last Arrow, The Genius of Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think there's one more, but I can't think of it. Anyways.
Oh yeah, you'll enjoy all of them. Yeah, the like I said, Soul Cravings is a top book in the Takamoto household here. So
Nice.
yeah, we love that book. But anyways, we could talk about that forever. But no, I love those two answers, man. Those are not answers I was expecting, but fantastic answers. I thought it was, like LeBron, that'd be great. But yeah, those are way better. LeBron would be kind of a tough interview.
I'm sorry?
LeBron would be kind of a tough interview, I think.
It'd kind of be tough. I mean, yeah, everybody else, it's just, I don't know. I don't find, it just depends on my mood. I don't know if we were recording yet when I told you, it's like my podcast goes through phases, and you can usually tell what I'm going through personally by who's a guest on my podcast. Like,
right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because I
Sure.
I want to learn from them. So
yeah, that was off air. Yeah, because you were asking kind of who listens. I'm like, that's a great question. It's all over the map. Like kind of the same thing. Depends on I'll see something on social media. It's like, oh, that's really interesting. Let's see if we can get them on the podcast. So we're in a very similar boat for sure when it comes to that. But okay. So that being said, the podcast. When did you start oversharing? And why is it named that? Why did you start it? All of those things. I want to know more about the podcast, man.
I think I've had the podcast for 5 or 6 years now.
Dang, really? Is that long?
Yeah. I do remember, I was recording it on my bed with like a Blue Yeti microphone, like
Yeah.
nothing wrong with it, obviously.
No.
But
Most people start there.
Yeah. And it wasn't called Oversharing at the time. Still the same RSS feed. It was actually called The Day in the Life back at the time. And the reason I started it is because my toxic trait is competitiveness. And I saw that somebody had started a podcast that I hadn't even talked to for years. And in my head, I was like, well, I could do that too. So I decided to start a podcast, and in the first month, I pumped out 27 episodes.
Whoa.
Just because, I like DM'd people. I was like, come on, like we're going to talk about it. It's always been an interview style podcast, but in the beginning, it was called The Day in the Life. So probably similar to Oversharing now, in that, like, I just kind of wanted to learn what it was like to be whoever you are. And so that was what it was. And then from A Day in the Life, I think I got really like Gary V wannabe-ish, and I just called it like The Podcast by Mikhail Alfon for a little bit.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Not my best moment.
Sure.
And that went through iterations of, having entrepreneurs on and mindset people and then if I was like trying to biz dev, I'd have CEOs on there and founders. Never really worked out that way, actually, where they became clients.
Sure.
And then the latest iteration is Oversharing. And I felt like Oversharing, the title was fine. There's a ton of oversharings on there now, which is kind of whatever. And you can kind of tell by the podcast art, like it's not about me anymore. And truly, it was never about me.
I do like the art, by the way.
I'm
Sorry, not to
sorry.
interrupt you. Not to interrupt you. I do like the artwork.
Oh, thank you. I
Yeah,
appreciate that. It's all done on Canva by myself. I have a whole team of creatives here, but for whatever reason, I never tap them on the shoulder to do stuff that's associated with my like personal brand, quote unquote. Damn it.
sure.
I haven't
No,
said personal brand in years for me. That
I could
sucks.
tell. I could tell there's a
Yeah.
little hesitation, and yeah,
Yeah, I really
that's all right.
didn't
We can
like
cut that
that.
if you want.
No,
No.
it's okay. But yeah, man. So it was never about that, but but my face, like you see all these like influencers who like the Lewis Howes, the Gary V's, like all these people, their face is on the thing, and it's like, who cares about me? If I'm good enough, I don't need to put my face on there. I
Sure.
don't think. And maybe, some branding expert or whatever, if some PR agent gets a hold of me eventually and wants to make me huge, maybe they'll tell me otherwise. But
Yeah.
honestly, it's like, it's so like, there's so much about that whole thing. I'm going to go on a tangent that's like really self-serving, and I needed to remove that. And it needs to be about that person. I want to make that person look like a rock star because they are. You
Hmm.
know what I mean? I'm sure you share the same sentiment. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I just didn't want it to be about me. So oversharing, and now I interview people, who are leaders in their own right. I think everybody's gone through something, and everybody has somebody takeaway from that. And it doesn't have to be massive. It's not like they had to be eating out of trash cans. And Eric Thomas might be on that list of people. I just think he's cool. Um, but
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it's not like they have to be eating out of trash cans and now they're a millionaire type of thing. But honestly, they could have just went through like a really gnarly breakup and then finally found out that being single for 3 years is really where they found their peace, and they chose who their significant other was instead of a circumstance,
Yeah.
right? And like those types of things I think are really important for us to learn from each other. And as much as it's, I guess, on one level it sounds fun, this is a lot longer than you asked. On one level it sounds fun to like talk to those big influencers and the Irwins and of the world and those types of things. Like I think that we've just over glamorized the influencer. It's like
Hmm.
these people are normal people who are recycling the same thing over and over and over again, and they package it slightly different. They'll put a
Hmm.
curse word at the end. They'll say babe in the beginning. They'll do whatever. It's
Sure.
slightly different, but it's all the same. You know what I mean? It's like we glamorize that too much, and it's like I can probably learn more from you than I can any of those influencers who have a canned response. You know what I mean? So, anyways.
It's interesting you say that, because every once in a while I kind of check the pulse of the podcast. We're not a huge podcast by any means. We're still in the very early stages. We've been doing it for a few years, but we're building slowly. But every once in a while I'll reach out to some people that I know are dedicated listeners to the show, and I say, hey, let me know what were your like top 5 episodes that we've done, over the course of this entire podcast. And it is interesting. A lot of times it's an episode with just a normal person who is a mom, a dad, who, doesn't do anything major, doesn't have
Mhm.
thousands and thousands of followers, but they just are a fun person. We had great conversation, just a normal conversation like this. They don't even own a business or anything. They really have a 9 to 5. And those are some of the
Yeah.
most popular episodes because, for the very reason you're saying, you're getting something from them that is not canned. It's not rehearsed. It's just very real and honest. And I think people, connectable, people can connect with it. And so it
Yeah.
is interesting. Even sometimes the numbers show that. And, so I 100% agree with that. And I think, it's interesting too. We could do a whole episode on just podcasting and pet peeves. But one of the things that you mentioned was, sometimes you do have the person that has the face on the artwork, or,
Yeah.
and you can tell very quickly that they have a guest on. And I'm just going to say it, they have a guest on, and it almost feels like that guest is meant to springboard them, because when you listen to the
Mhm.
podcast, the guest versus host speaking ratio is way off. And it's like, man,
Yeah.
I tuned in to listen to the guest, and I've heard the host speak way more.
Yeah.
And it's bizarre to me. I hate when that happens, but it happens a lot.
Yeah. I can't, I don't like that. I even hear like, and I know that I'm the guest on your podcast tonight. Thank you again. But I
Oh,
still,
thank
I
you.
still want to give space for you to speak as well, because I do think that there are a lot of people do that. The other thing, if we're just talking about pet peeves, I can't stand it when people ask me to be a guest on my podcast. Is that
Oh,
weird?
okay. I was going to ask you. It's funny. Okay, see, man, we're on the same wavelength here, because I was going to say, what drives me nuts along the same lines is when they hint at it. So, oh, you have a
Yeah.
podcast? Cool, cool, cool. You have a lot of guests? Yeah. Okay, cool. And then it's like, you can like, hey man, I know what you're doing. I wish you would have just said, can I be a guest in your podcast? But like, you're hinting, hoping that I'm going to ask you.
Yeah.
It drives me nuts. But go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt
I
you.
get the ones I get are straight up just like I'll put out as like, hey, do you know anybody I should like? I'll put it on Instagram stories. Do you know anybody that I should interview? And I'll get people that say me, or just people be like, hey, I'd love to be a guest on your podcast, or it's like, hey, we should do a podcast. I was like, cool. Like, what's the name of your podcast? It's like, no, I should be on your podcast. Like, oh, I didn't know that.
Oh, it's
Okay,
gross,
yeah, but
man.
it's fine. I shouldn't be like that. I should be flattered. Actually, this is something I struggle with, but I should be flattered that they want to speak with me, and I am. I there is a little bit of that, but it's like a personal thing for me. It's like that's kind of weird. It's like I didn't invite you to my party, and you showed up at my party. Like,
Right.
whatever.
Right. Well, yeah, I don't know. I guess it depends on the person. I'll say that.
Yeah.
It depends on the person. And I've experienced it both ways. I've had some people that were, I think, genuinely wanted to have conversation. I'm perfectly fine with that. I've never had an issue with that. I have had issue with some people who you could tell had a very clear agenda.
Mm.
And again, you're probably a better person than I am. But what makes it worse is when if we go through a little process, okay, let me see what you're about. And we have them on. And if they claim to be one thing and they're not, like if they say like, I do this all the time, and then they basically, they're not stand-up comedians, but if they bomb on the podcast, like, oh,
Yeah.
you said you were good at this and you said you were one thing, but you basically just wanted to pitch whatever your business was, or,
Yeah.
it drives, but again, I think what it really comes down to is it's not authentic.
Mhm.
Like if you're authentic and you ask to be on the podcast, I have no problem. We've had plenty of people that have requested to be on. And like I said, we have a little bit of a process we go through, and they're like, yeah, absolutely. I'll go through whatever process. And they're cool with it. Some people is like, I have to go through that process. Like, well, clearly we have a different, agenda here, but yeah, there's a lot of different things about that. But like I said, you're probably a nicer person than I am.
No, I think that we're probably the same. And the thing is, I think that just in anything in general, outside of the selfishness of who we want on our podcast, I think that there's a level of courtesy and a level of professionalism that people need to that I think that is necessary for people to carry just to get on through life. And you see people overstep, I think, in every aspect of life, whether it's at the line in McDonald's, or I love McDonald's, by the way, at the line in McDonald's,
Who
that was a
doesn't?
tell.
Yeah.
Yes. Or, when it comes to that stuff. And I think that it just comes down to, just be courteous and be respectful, be professional, those sorts of things. And when that doesn't happen, it's easy to get offended sometimes. But, I've been trying to, and I'm sure you do it too. We're all just trying to make it out here. I try to have a little bit of empathy for where they're coming from. And
Sure.
on the other side, this is truly where my mind goes. And now I almost want to reach back out to these people and be like, look, do you really want to do it? But my mind goes to a place that's like, well, maybe they just have been struggling to be heard. And for the first time, they might feel like we're those people who can help them be heard. Oh man, do I really want to email them back?
Man,
It's
now I feel guilty. I'm gonna have to
but
look at
it's true, right?
my DMs and emails too.
It's hard. It's hard. Like, this is a thing that, my wife is so good at doing this, and I'm pretty good at doing it, but I have my initial reaction is always like kind of like salty, but then I go back and I'm like, dang, like, what's that person going through? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
at all
true.
times. I think that's an important sentiment to have, to be honest with you.
That's good. That's convicting for me, because that's a good way of looking at it. I looked at it more from just again, the competitive side of me is kind of like, you should have tried better. But then, there's a piece of that. You're right. Like if they're just trying to make it as well, and, grasping at straws, like that empathy needs to play a part too. So that's good. I appreciate what you just said there. I'm learning on my own podcast. Now I do want, that being said, the competitive thing, you have mentioned being competitive multiple times here. And I appreciate what you said about, hey, I saw these people doing these podcasts. I'm like, I could do that too, and I could do it better. I appreciate that, because I've had that conversation before where there have been times where I see other podcasts and I'm like, you know what? I feel like we're on par with that, or I feel like we're doing a little better. And then on the flip side of that, I see some that I'm like, man, we have a lot of work to do. Like they're really good, and I gotta step it up, whether it be on the production side or just as far as the things that I'm saying and how I'm speaking. So that's interesting, man. Like I feel like the competitiveness is really good, And then there are times if you become overwhelmed by it, then, it can blind us. It can blind us all, I mean, especially if it's
100%.
just naturally in you. So I'm sure you've dealt with that before, where it's the thing that's gotten you to the place where you're at. But at the same time, if we're not careful, it can kind of overtake us.
Oh yeah, totally. And I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier is, I did a really good job. I do a really good job about making everything about me. You know what
Yep.
I mean? And I have to stop that. The best results come when you have other people in mind, 100%. And that's true for podcasts. That's true in my client work at Blue Light, and anything that I do, right? And so I go through those two. You definitely like a little bit of humility. Because the thing is, no matter how good we get, there's always going to be somebody that's going to be a little bit better, right? And yeah, and I think lately it's interesting. It's like I think that or at least I've done a great job on the podcast up until the last like 2 years, where like now you kind of have to produce like a mini TV show with,
Right.
you have a great camera, you have great lights behind you. I'm like so far behind on that right now. And it's so nice that you say I post nice things on my Instagram, because I think my Instagram's trash and like,
Uh,
yeah. so, yeah, but it's all a work in progress,
yeah. Do you enjoy social media?
Mm, maybe. I love
Yeah,
the
I'm with
fact
you.
that we got on this podcast together. And I love the fact that some of my closest friends now are because of social media, but don't like the content that's being put that's out there a lot. I do like the fact that I feel like, at least within my circle of friends, I guess you could say, we've kind of crossed that hump of everybody trying to be an influencer, and some people do it and they do it well, and other people are like, okay, I'm over this now.
Mhm.
um so yeah, I love TikTok. I like watching TikTok, but
Oh,
like,
I can't do it.
yeah, I love it.
I'll say we do it. I'm not happy about it. I,
Yeah.
I broke down, but
The clout chasing though, the clout chasing on Instagram, uh and just in general, like the whole idea of personal branding and all that's all tired to me now,
yeah.
so, but
Well,
it's
and if
part of
I'm
the game.
if I'm not mistaken, you are located in Southern California, right?
Yes.
So it's a kind of a different world down there too. I mean, I'm up in Northern California, but obviously being down there in LA, near LA, like that's a
Mhm.
big part of it. So it's like you're constantly surrounded by it. So I imagine that would make it even more difficult. You see it on social media, and then you walk
Yeah.
out your door, and then you're just hit in the face with it again.
Yeah, I'm in Orange County, and
Okay,
it's still pretty similar. There's definitely a little bit of that that happens here. And you know, I don't know. Even when I was in high school, I I had a lot of friends, but I was never part of the popular club. But
sure,
I was friends with people in that club, and I think that's still me today.
yeah,
And I don't know. You know how it is, man. You have a wife and kids. Like, she doesn't. You know, I like I paid for my blue check mark. I wanted to see what all the fuss was about.
yeah,
Um, you know, and I always test stuff like that anyways, because it's like, okay, well, it's something.
sure,
And I wanted to see what that was all about. And but my wife didn't know any better. She didn't know that, like, I can't imagine that she knows that it's a thing that Instagram's just releasing right now. But obviously when I DM her, it comes up. She doesn't say anything because she
right,
doesn't care.
right,
Like, she just doesn't care. And like, I laughed about it, because I was like, the one person whose opinion I actually care about, like, doesn't care about any of that stuff.
right.
And so, and I've gotten far enough into we've only been married for like 3 years now, but I've gotten far enough to where I'm like, I don't care. I don't care. As long as she's happy, like, I'm good, dude. My grandma doesn't care how many followers I have, and neither does my mom. So
Right,
like,
right. Yeah.
what am I doing? What are we doing? Who cares?
Can you imagine though if your mom and it's like your wife was like, "Hey, how many followers do you have?" That's
Like,
okay.
low key though, like,
That'd be
so
wild.
I guaranteed my mom tells her friends. She's like, guaranteed. She's like, my son hosts a podcast. I bet she does. She's so proud of me. He's so proud of
But
me. That's why, like, and I'm so blessed to have my mom, but like, she's so proud of me. I guarantee she does that, but like, but she doesn't care in that she cares with like maybe in the same way she puts the fact that my brother went to Cal, like she has like Berkeley mom on her license plate, that type
sure.
of thing. So I'm sure if she had like if there was like a my son's verified on Instagram, she would like fully put that
Hey man, if hey, if that's not out there, that might be your next project. Get the team on that.
exactly.
A new
That's an
bumper
easy one.
sticker. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, hey man, my mom's the same way. And I love my mom. She's actually been a guest on our podcast before, which was a lot of fun. We did it for Mother's Day last year.
Oh,
And but she's the same thing. I can be like, hey mom, I had this person on my podcast. She's like, okay, cool. Like, how are the grandkids? How is your wife? Like
mm,
she's more concerned about how I am as a husband, as
mm,
a father, and as a human being than she's like, it's awesome that you're doing the podcast, but life's bigger than that. So I get that for sure, man. I get that for
yeah.
sure. And my wife, if I was trying to make my wife think I was cool at this point in our marriage, we've been married for it will be 7 years in June. Be a massive problem. It's like, hey, do you think I'm cool today? She's like, no, I haven't
Yeah.
thought you were cool for a long time. We're good.
Are
Let's keep it moving.
you know what's yeah, 100%. And you know what's cool is like check this out. You could probably see it. I don't know if this is a little off script of what you do on your podcast, but
We
you
have
could
no
probably see
script.
like yeah, that's my wife back there, right there.
Oh yeah,
Can you see
nice.
her?
Very
Yeah.
cool.
So she came to the office. I was like, she's like, babe, what time are you coming home? I was like, late. I'm doing a podcast interview at 8. She's like, oh, you want me to bring you sushi and like keep you company? I was like,
Ah, nice.
I kinda, yeah, like you're the best.
No, that's awesome. That's very cool. Now, does she hate this podcast now? She's like, what's the name of the podcast? Oh, 1-star review. It's taking up my husband's time.
Nah, she's the best, man. I like it's crazy, but it just goes to show, like, you know, it goes to show who's like, who are we trying to impress? And I think that's the issue that I have with social media in general. And to bring it back, it's like, well, nobody else is in this room with me right now. It's just her. You know
Right.
what I mean? So
Right.
like, so from that perspective, like, no, definitely don't care. Don't really care for like social media in that respect. But it's been a
Yeah.
good business tool and a
Yeah.
creative outlet.
Right. And I think that's what it comes down to, right? It is a tool at the end of the day. It's not life. It's not, the main source of our purpose. It is a tool to be used to connect with people. And if you can keep it at that and have fun with it, that's where it ends, and that's what it should be. So hey
Yeah.
man, I want to make sure I'm respectful of your time. I really do appreciate the conversation. I feel like this conversation can go on for a while. But I'm going to ask you this one last question. I should have prepped you for this. I didn't. We've done this podcast for so long. I never prep our guests for this, and I always feel bad, but I never do it. We call it a connection suggestion. So obviously,
Mm.
our goal is to help people get connected. We want people to get connected to you and vice versa. But we also want to give you an opportunity to give a shout out to someone. So if you have a specific person, an organization, a brand, someone that we can go, follow, our audience can go follow and get more, info about what they're doing. Do you have anybody in mind or something in mind that would be a good connection suggestion?
Oh man, this is gonna be like
It's like picking your favorite kid.
no, I can it be like a can it be a YouTube video?
Yeah, please.
And is it somebody for you or somebody for the listener?
For anybody, mainly for the listener, but yeah, it can be for me. Yeah, but if it's whatever you want it to be, something that we need to connect with.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So, oh shoot, and I should connect you with them. Sorry, I'm trying to get all the parameters of this rule or of
Oh
this
no,
game.
it's very wide open. So basically, it's just something, some person, some brand, organization. It could be a video, a book, anything that you think we should be connected with. Something that maybe our audience, they may or may not know, but they can kind of take away from saying, hey, I need to look into this, and the person or the thing that you're shouting out, gets a little love too.
Yeah, okay, sounds good. So we kind of talked about him a little bit, but there's one sermon in particular from Erwin Manis called the Line in the Sand that came out a couple weeks ago.
That's
And I
good.
think that's one of the most beautiful messages of what the Christian life should be like and what it actually is like. The one amazing thing that he said when he was on my show is that his mission is to redefine the narrative of Jesus, because it's been misconstrued over the last couple decades. And I think that's
Sure.
100% true. And something like that, that message is really important. It's about grace and it's about forgiveness. And I think that, the media, the, politics, everything is completely perverted what the gospel is all about. And I'm
Yeah.
telling this as somebody who's like done his fair share of drugs, parties, like all of the same things, all the things that people might be going through and why they might not feel accepted or loved in a community like that. But those are all the reasons absolutely why you would feel loved in that. So I think that that's, for me, like, that's a video that people should watch for sure. And yeah, and that's that.
Perfect. I love it. So even though we talked about social media potentially being a challenging thing, where can they follow you on social media? Where do they have your websites, all that stuff?
Yeah, everything's at Mick, MIQK. The Q comes before the K. And there's a Substack, mick.substack.com. That's a weekly newsletter with marketing and like motivational stuff. You can find me on Instagram and you'll find all of those things. Yeah.
Perfect. I love it. Go follow him. Go listen to the podcast. It's a great podcast. He's got plenty of episodes to listen to. So if you're looking for a new podcast, you have a lot to catch up on. So, Mikhail, man, we appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time and good luck with everything moving forward.
I appreciate you so much, man. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for watching the show. If you enjoyed that episode, make sure you like it, share it, and hit the subscribe button to get a new episode every week. We'll see you next time on the Connectable Podcast.